It's exactly what I wanted, every bit of it. Okay, it's a 1981 Camaro Z28. I've had it for about 18 years. I got it when I was 16. I drove it through high school. It was all stock, all original, no rust, just mint. And I drove it when I could in high school, I guess, when the weather was nice. And then as soon as it started to get cold, I'd park it, buy a beater, and drive that thing. And summer came around, I'd pull that thing out, drive it again. And then just one day kind of parked it, and it sat. One summer I took it out, took it for a drive, and parked it on my brother's driveway, and he ran into the front of it and cracked the polyurethane nose cone, and I kind of just parked the car after that. I just was like, one of these days I'll get around to repainting it or doing something with it, and I don't know, it sat for so long, and I wanted to build a car. I was looking at building a 68 Chevelle, and I almost pulled the trigger on one, and I was talking with my wife, and she was like, why don't you do something with the Camaro? Well, okay. And I should have named this car Snowball, because it really did just snowball. Like, it started off, it was just gonna be simple, 383 stroker, repaint it, you know, maybe a little bit better suspension so I could drive it around, some better tires and maybe some bigger rims. And so I had some small block parts, sent it off to the machine shop, and they called me up and they're like, man, these heads are just not gonna work. Like, they're way too high compression. You're gonna need race fuel. And so it's kind of back to the drawing board. And then I was looking up, I wanted to run boost on something then. I thought, well, let's go a little bit more modern. Let's go with an LS and put some boost on it. So I fell on a Pro Charger, had to be a Pro Charger, because I had to have everything fit under the stock hood, and I'm not a big fan of turbos. So went that route, decided Pro Charger, and then went with the LSX 376 B15 crate motor. And I hadn't seen a lot of guys running them, which was crazy, because they were making almost 500 horse naturally aspirated, but GM designed the engine to be boosted up to 15 pounds of boost. They have two, there's a 7 or a 9 and a 15, and GM will warranty this one to 15 pounds of boost. So I thought, well, man, if it makes 500 horse naturally aspirated, like, what's that thing gonna make with 15 pounds of boost? So I got that, and then so after I bought the engine, it snowballed. I knew if I was gonna get the car done anywhere, I had seen a One Lap of America Camaro that Heighton Restoration built out in Beiseker. I'd seen it at the World of Wheels, and I fell in love with that car. And I must have been 18 or 17 at the time when I seen that car. And so I always knew if I was ever gonna get my car built, that's who'd do it. So got in touch with Chris at Heighton Restoration and got on their wait list, got the car in.
A little further into the shop here, we've got a 81 Camaro Z28. We did this car a year and a half ago.
Okay.
It's just in here just for some minor touch-ups, a little bit of minor electrical. We have to change the rear bumper on it. We had a problem with the rear bumper. It's the urethane bumpers, so we repainted another bumper and we're putting that on it.
Okay.
And it's a pretty neat car. We had this in World of Wheels last year, I believe.
Yeah, I think I can say I'm pretty sure I've seen this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I started plucking away at stuff. I'd ordered the engine, and I ordered a Ride Tech suspension, so it's got a full Ride Tech suspension, 4-link in the rear, I got a Moser 9-inch muscle pack rear end with Willwood brakes, 389 gears. It's got a billet third member. I'm still using the factory spindles in the front with the RideTech suspension, but I have a Willwood brake kit added onto it. So, but the car does sit quite a bit lower than it did factory because of the coilovers all the way around. So I got the suspension put in the car. I kind of started mocking up the engine and transmission, and then about that time, Heighton was ready for it. So they took over. They put an American Auto Wire full wiring kit in the car and did the body work on it, and it's just like laser beam straight, that car. I can stand there and talk about it for hours. Like, you park beside anything and you look at the reflection on my car, and then you look at the reflection of some other cars, and it's like, that's why I made the decision to go to Heighton Restoration, because man, it's nice. So they got everything else done on the car, went all the way through everything, finalized all the little bits. I always say the last 10% of a build is what takes the longest, and all the little nooks and crannies, all the little things that they added in and did and changed, like sinking my hood pins and the way they mounted my intercooler. I had already mounted everything, but I hadn't taken into account the bumper and the nose cone and everything. So when they went to go put the bumper on, they're like, this isn't gonna work. So they changed the piping a little bit, brought the piping back to me, I re-welded it, and got everything, and then just everything they did on the front end was just so nice. All the work they did with the intercooler and everything was just beautiful. And like I said, the engine had to fit under the factory hood. Everything had to fit. So I originally had a Holley high ram, and I would have had to cut just a little bit out of my factory hood scoop, and I didn't want to do that. So I ended up going with the Texas speed intake that was 3/4 of an inch shorter, and it bought me just enough. I still had to cut the factory hood out and modify inside the factory hood scoop, but it just fits inside of that hood. So that's kind of the whole point. When it's cruising down the road, it doesn't really look like it's much, but when you open it up and it pumps 18 pounds of boost into it, because of course warranties are made to be broken. So when GM says it can go to 15 pounds of boost, I know it'll take more than that. So. Fucking A, man. We pumped at first quite a bit into it, but I was running out of octane and I didn't want to go to race fuel. I wanted to be able to stop at any gas station and put fuel in it. So got to run premium, of course, but the last time it was on the dyno, or when it was dynoed and tuned at first, it put just over 700 at the ground. But I've changed a couple things now, and I'd like to see it again and get it in and get it worked in. Now that it's got some miles on it, broken in a little bit more, they can beat on it a little bit harder. I told them not to break it when they were dynoing it, and Davenport tuned it too. It's got a Terminator system in it that runs it. Like I said, American Auto Wire, and then I have a Dakota Digital gauge cluster that was supposed to be a factory match, and their American ones look really close to factory. And of course, being in Canada, I had to have kilometer an hour and everything. So when I first sent out and ordered for it in kilometer an hour, when I got it, I wasn't really happy with it. It didn't look a whole lot like factory. There was like an orange ring on the factory cluster that it was missing. It was missing the mile an hour. And I reached out to them, and they were wicked. They were like, send it back to us. I believe they even took care of me, of the shipping, to send it back to them. And I worked with the guy for about a week, back and forth, sending him pictures of my factory cluster and him sending me kind of renderings of how they were going to do it. And they ended up changing the Canadian cluster, and it is like bang on. The only way you wouldn't know that it isn't factory is when you turn the key and the little digital screens turn on. And then in 81 only, they changed the needles on the speedometer and the RPM and everything. So they don't have those needles. It has this 80 and prior needles. So I always wonder, because their website said that it offered the gauge cluster up until 1980, but not 81. And they still made these cars in 81. So I reached out to them. They couldn't figure it out. And I looked at it, and it looks like it's the same. And then when I got it, I realized it was because of the needles. And I talked to Dakota, and they were like, yeah, if you send it back to us and send us your cluster, we'll swap your needles onto it. And I thought, whatever. Nobody will know the difference, really. And it looks wicked. That Dakota's a nice system in that thing, too. And that was the other main thing in the car, was I wanted it to look as original as possible, but yet not be original as possible. Like when you look at it, the wheels and the brakes are a dead giveaway that the car's not stock. But when you look inside of the car, you sit inside of the car, it feels like you're sitting in an 81 Z28. The interior, the seats are all original. The carpet is the only thing that was changed. The headliner's original, like the T-tops are still original. Everything feels original when you're sitting in that car until you start it. And even when you're cruising it, it kind of still sounds like it did with the 350 in it. And then you stand on it and it's a whole different animal. It's hard to contain, kind of. But it's turned into something proud to drive, that's for sure. Fuel system, I got a Phantom dual 340 gallon per hour fuel pump. I'm running dash 12 feed line and dash 10 return line, so it's got like a 7/8 feed line. It gets huge, man. So, but it gets the fuel it needs, I guess. And then it's got a Holley front mount on the engine. I'm running a redhead, or not a redhead, that's Dodge. I'm running a Flaming River steering box in it with a really short ratio, and I'm swapping that out this winter. I'm going to go with a rack and pinion system in it, and I am going to put AC in the car this winter too. There's a couple times driving it around. I mean, this is probably the most I've driven the car since I got it. When I got the car, it had 98,000 kilometers on it, and in the 10 years that I had the car before I started doing anything to it, I maybe put 12,000 kilometers on it. This summer alone, I put almost 5,000 kilometers on it, driving it around. So when I built the car, I'm like, I don't need AC, I got vents and I got T-tops. Well, now it's a little different. It's a lot hotter, it makes a lot more power. So the car itself like when I drive out to the Radium Car Show, it's usually a cool weekend. I'm like shoes off, my feet are baking. It is hot in that car. So when you get driving it when it's 30 above, it gets hot in that thing. So it's gonna get a vintage air for sure. And like I said, rack pinion steering, and we'll see maybe some more power. Like I said, once my brother Chevelle gets here and we start lining up, if he starts beating me pretty bad, I'll be putting more power in it. Maybe different cam, maybe some heads, because the long block itself is still original, or still factory, I guess. The only thing that I did change upon further digging on finding out why a lot of guys weren't running that LSX B15 from GM. I mean, it's 13,000 or 12 and a half for the long block from GM with warranty with boost. I mean, you can't go wrong. You can't build an engine that'll take 15 pounds of boost for $12,000 and have warranty. So what I was finding was that a lot of guys were revving the engines up and cratering the valve train in them because they were only running a single valve spring. So the first thing I did before we even started tuning it was have Davenport put a set of beehives in it. So now I got dual springs and kind of a bit of peace of mind to make sure that that thing's not going to come apart on me. Because that's what almost anybody that I found on the internet that had ran one and blew it up, that was why. They took it up, I took it up to higher RPM, and it just, valve train just cratered on it. But that's what happens, I guess, when you run just a single valve spring. But like I say, I may put a bigger cam in it, but I like the way it idles right now. It doesn't sound like it's nasty, but when you get onto it, it's nasty. So, the paint and everything, it's a factory color. The decals, I had them put Heighton wanted to paint the Z28 stripes on the car. And part of me wishes I would have let him do it because it would have looked really good. But I wanted, like I said, I wanted it to look original. So when you walk by it and see that it's still decals, it's kind of sweet. So the decal kit had to go on the car. I know a lot of guys, when they repaint these cars, they don't put the decals on them. And it had to stay the original color too. You see a lot of guys that rebuild these cars, they paint them all black or yellow or something. You don't see a lot of color of this color around to begin with. So it is a house of color though, but it's a factory match. I think they call it crazy metallic maple or something like that. And then it's got a lot of clear coat. Yeah, exactly, very Canadian. Which is like in 81, in the States, if you wanted a 81 Z28 with a 350, you had to get an automatic because of emissions. If you wanted a 4-speed, you had to get a 305. But in Canada, the emissions hadn't hit here yet. So in 81, you could get a 350 with a 4-speed, and only in Canada. So a lot of people at first, when I started doing this, they're like, those cars are going to be worth a lot of money someday because they only made 350 4-speed Camaros in 81 in Canada. Whatever. I built it to drive it. Take my kids to the grocery store, wherever they want to go. Like I said, I put a little over 5,000 kilometers on it this summer. So.
Get in there.
We spent some time in it, driving around, getting groceries, doing a beer run, whatever. Leaving tires everywhere. I'm gonna have to start stockpiling tires because they're gone on it right now. Oh yeah, I was thinking about it before I went to the Radium Car Show. I was like, I should throw a new set on. And I'm looking at them, I'm like, they still got a bit. I can do a couple burnouts out there. And I did a couple, and then I looked at them. I'm like, oh, he's still gonna drive her home, man. I'm like, be good, do it. So I don't know. I think I could maybe get away with one more, but I got new tires coming for it already. But next year for Radium, I'm putting a brand new set on before I go out, and I'm gonna leave with nothing. Try and take care of a set throughout the summer. I doubt it'll happen, but that's what it's for. It's built to be driven and driven hard, and it gets driven as hard as it should be.